I've been buying real estate in the US as a Canadian for over 2 years now. And one of the biggest questions I ask is, how's it going and do I have any regrets? When I first started out, it was actually a big decision for me to make as a Canadian because I was now looking at investing into a completely foreign market. But the thing that I had to consider was that not really a new or novel idea. I mean, we've been hearing about it for years, how Canadians are buying property in Florida, Texas, and all kinds of places because the prices just make sense. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about how that's been going, how that decision really panned out, and whether or not it's worth it for you to make a decision to shift into the US market. So the first thing I want to address here is why are so many Canadians interested in the US market? And obviously it has a lot to do with price point. Properties in the US are just vastly, at large, cheaper than they are in Canada. I mean, you look at the Canadian real estate market versus the US real estate market, price-wise, it's like night and day for what you're getting, right? And the thing to consider about that is, why are they cheaper? Because a lot of people will look at this and say, is it too good to be true? Well, the US things are different. You know, the US, they have guns. Is that going to really affect my real estate portfolio? There's a lot of questions that people have. So I want to address some of the questions that people might have, the typical questions first, how buying property in the US could make sense, some of the infrastructure that you would need and things you need to know about. I want to talk a little bit about the financial system, and then I want to talk a little bit about how my portfolio is actually going. So to be clear, when I started buying properties in the US, I started off with simple things. I started off with single family homes, duplexes, and then I went into a couple of partnerships buying small to mid-sized multi-residential properties. And the way I was doing this was a couple of years ago when the market started getting hit, I started to liquidate properties that were cash flowing negative or cash flowing neutral, and I would buy 1 to 2 properties with the equity over there in the US. Now, some of the initial questions people might have will have to do with, can I as a Canadian own property in the US? And the answer to that is yes, you can. And there are ways to set it up through corporations, and then you have to address things like taxes, right? People also have questions about how does it work in terms of taxes, double taxation, and other such things. These are all things you can set up through a cross-border accountant. You can set up a corporation over there and you can buy property. But after that, the challenge is what kind of property is actually going to make sense? And when I put this all together, what type of financial products do I qualify for and other such things? Which, by the way, these are the types of questions that people ask us all the time. And if you have questions that you want answered, we are hosting free weekly sessions on Tuesday where you can join up and ask the questions that you have. We talk about deals that we look at, how we analyze them, how we budget, and we answer questions about what Canadians need to know about buying in the US. If you want to join that, click on the link below to sign up for one of our free sessions. Another common question that people have around buying property in the US is, how do I get things set up? Like, do I feel comfortable buying property in a foreign market? If you are Canadian, let's say you're living in Toronto, would you be thinking about investing in Toronto? The answer is no, because it's too expensive. Where would you be thinking of investing? And a lot of people would say, okay, I'm going to buy in St. Catharines, I'm going to buy in Sudbury, I'm going to buy in Hamilton, I'm going to buy in Oshawa, I'm going to be buying someplace that's cheaper, that makes a little more financial sense. And then you might be saying, okay, if I'm going to do that, am I going to be driving there all the time to manage it, or am I going to be hiring somebody? If you're already in the mindset that you're willing to hire somebody, you can invest almost anywhere. You just need to be able to find somebody that you can trust. A lot of experienced investors, if you ask them, would they invest in a certain city? Many of them will say, I would only invest there if I could find a good property manager, somebody I can trust, somebody who's going to be boots on the ground, who's going to do what I can't. Now, something else I feel is important to mention here is the market that you might choose to invest in. So I decided that I wanted to start investing in places like Ohio. Part of the reason is because it's a neighboring state. It's close by. It actually takes me about 5 hours to 5.5 hours to drive, if I wanted to my properties in the US. For some people, I might think, oh, 5-hour drive. I mean, I don't know if I want to do that, but you know, if you're the type of person who was looking at Sudbury or even Sault Ste. Marie to buy rental property, I mean, it's in the wrong direction. You can go south and find more affordable property that makes a lot more sense. And on top of that, if you think that the US dollar is going to continue to outperform the Canadian dollar, then you're really hedging yourself against the Canadian market. Which, since we're talking about the money, let's get a little bit into the financial system. Something to be aware of is that the financial products in the US are far more mature than they are in Canada. The real estate market at large is far more mature. When it comes to certain problems that you have to deal with rental properties in Canada, and you have to kind of really think about how to solve them, you need an excellent property manager who can really think in order to make things happen. In the US, a lot of this stuff is standardized, and that makes the whole process a lot easier. There's a product off the shelf that you can buy to solve most any problem, and that is very comforting. I mean, even in the financial system, for example, you know how we do the BRRRR strategy. You really have to MacGyver the financial products that are available to you in such a way that you can now do the BRRRR strategy, which means that you sometimes have to pay penalties or fees in order to make this happen, or pay higher interest rates for open mortgages and other such things. And to be honest, this is really troublesome sometimes. Sometimes you miss something and then it's just, you can't do the BRRRR strategy anymore. But in the US, if you go to any bank, they have already pre-packaged products available for you to do this. They understand that real estate investors are going to buy property, fix it, and they're going to want to pull their money out. So they already have a product available that facilitates this instead of you having to just go get an open mortgage, keep it open for a period of time, and then get the property reevaluated and all these other things. I mean, in the US, in many cases, you can even finance your renovations. So these are all things that are just very nice to know that are available to you, and that, you know, if you're in a pinch, you can always find a financial product that will make things work. And another footnote on that is that, you know, as a Canadian, you can qualify for mortgages in the US. In some cases, you do have to have 35% down. You can, after having a little bit of a track record, also do 25% down. Now let's talk a little bit about how things are going for our properties in the US. So let's talk about one thing that concerns a lot of Ontarians is, you know, rent collection. Is rent collection a problem over there? Across all of our properties, I haven't personally had any issues collecting rent. I have had people be late on rent, but I haven't had to, you know, knock on wood, do any evictions. I do know people who have had to do them, and on average, the general consensus is that it will take approximately 3 months to have this happen. Now, people also have questions about tenancies that have to do with Section 8 tenancies. I have one in a JV that we inherited. We didn't place this tenant. They are apparently paying a little bit above market. And apparently what will happen is if they stop paying rent, government will subsidize their rent. So you will actually continue to get paid, which is amazing. That's good to know, because if you are buying cheaper properties in, let's say, lower than C-class neighborhoods, which I'm also going to mention this here, I don't like to buy lower than C-class neighborhoods. B- and then C+ is kind of where it's at for me. When I talk to managers over there, there's a lot of managers that don't want to manage certain types of properties, and that for me is a red flag, so I don't do that. So I avoid those type of neighborhoods, which as a Canadian, my stress tolerance might be very different than what it would be for American real estate investors. But I was to say, we haven't had to evict tenants, and we haven't had any tenants cause us any particular trouble. So overall, pretty smooth sailing, which is great. If we want to touch on how things are going from the perspective of appreciation, from 2 years ago when we bought property, you know, I'd say we're seeing actually like maybe 7% growth or something. And there is a little bit of a bump happening from investors. But in Ohio specifically, I did a lot of research, and there is other industry coming in. Intel has moved in there. There is a lot of healthcare that is also being invested. And there is also an investor-focused growth. You know, Ohio is one of those places that you can buy property that's just going to cash flow off the bat. So it's attractive to a lot of people, and they're just putting their money over there. Where, as I said before, I sold cash flow negative or neutral properties, and I bought properties in the US that are cash flow positive. It completely changes your financial position. But in terms of appreciation, I wouldn't have the highest expectations of it. If you're the type of person who, after the recent volatility in the Canadian market, is now like, hey, I want to play a bit of a cash flow game, this is something you should consider. And I would definitely advise investing in the US just for the cash flow diversity. But now I want to talk about if there's anything I would have done differently or if I have any regrets. So far, my biggest regret is that I hadn't diversified into it earlier. I don't know why I ever allowed myself to feel comfortable buying properties that would only cash flow a few $100. Because when I first started getting into real estate, all the properties I bought, because I started young, I actually started buying properties that would all cash flow about $1,000, $800 to $1,000. Anything less than that was just ridiculous. And now I found myself buying properties that were like cash flowing $400. And the thing is that repairs are so expensive now that if you're making $200, $300, $400 a month, that can get obliterated by a freaking plumbing leak or a toilet repair or, you know, God knows what. So it's like there's pretty much negligible, if not no cash flow happening at all. And that is not something that I think from a cash flow perspective, you should accept. So I do regret not having diversified earlier. Something else, depending on the financial position, I don't feel I should have bought the single family home. Because of the way the financial system is and what I know now, I would have actually gone straight into some multi-residential. But I understand when you're first getting started, there's a confidence level, there's a confidence threshold. But it's just multi-residential is a lot easier at a certain financial resource. But if you are just getting started and you don't want headaches, like let's say you have a job and you just want to park your money, invest in something passively, and have extra income. Single family home is great. You have hardly any management. You just collect the rent. I know a lot of people who just collect the rent themselves. They send a maintenance request. You have a contractor. You just send them over. They handle most of the stuff. It's like very easy. But the minute you have duplexes, triplexes, anything like that, property managers are necessary, and that's an extra cost. If you're looking for simplicity, single family homes are great. It's just single family homes don't yield the same appreciation prospects as we might be used to in Canada. So if you're looking for cash flow, multi-residential is super powerful. And that's most of what I want to tell you. Honestly, guys, I can keep talking about this for hours and hours, but if you want to know more about this, definitely connect with us. I'm going to leave a link in the description below to our free sessions. We have a lot of free resources. We do have a community that was growing every day. And if you want to be part of it and be part of a movement of Canadians who is really growing and scaling in real estate, you should definitely connect with us. Join one of our sessions and let's see if we can grow together. Until then, hope to see you soon and see you on the next video.